everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm worried that the audio is bad, but I cannot make it to Pizza and PowerPoints because I have class, so I'm filming this in advance to talk about my field school experience at Jamestown. So hopefully you enjoy. So first and foremost, why did I choose to go to Jamestown? One of the reasons is location. I'm a Virginia resident and I've always been really interested in Virginia history. It's definitely very complex. There's a lot to kind of delve into, but in particular I've always been interested in Jamestown. I went as a fourth grader on a field trip and we visited the recreated James Fort, an indigenous village, which is a little bit further away from the actual archaeological site, but it really left an impression on me even at that age, and I still remember it. So this was just a great opportunity to kind of do something that I've been interested in for a long time. It kind of combined my interest in historical archaeology with my minor in American Studies, and it's also really great to get some more training in GPR and GIS, which we did during this field school, because I know that those technologies are so important in archaeology right now. And it was great that I qualified for in-state tuition, and I got $1,500 from BU, so I'm really, really grateful for that. Here's a picture of the archaeological site, or like the sort of fort area, and here I am somewhere, probably not helping very much, but here we are carrying the wheelbarrows with all of our supplies in it for the day to the actual site itself. So just a little bit of historical background. I'm not going to go in detail about this, obviously, but just the more relevant parts. So pre-1607, the site was actually not occupied permanently by indigenous people, and that's partially because it was very marshy and there really wasn't access to fresh water, which was a problem later on for the settlers. So very little settlement going on pre-1607. 1607, sorry, my computer went dark. 1607 was when the settlers arrived. It was mostly men and young boys, and they were there for economic reasons. It was not like the pilgrims who were coming to escape persecution. Like, this was a purely economic venture. They named the area James Fort, and they named the river the James River after King James I in England, obviously. And over the few next years, women began to come over to Jamestown. And here's actually a drawing of the original James Fort that was done by John Smith, which is pretty cool. But 1609 to 1610 was called the Starving Time. I'm sure some of you have heard about it. It's fairly well known, but during that time, 500 of the settlers were reduced to 61 by the end of the winter. There was starvation, there was disease, there was cannibalism. The indigenous people had kind of, like, there was conflict with the indigenous people, and basically the settlers couldn't leave the fort without being attacked, so they were forced into the fort the entire winter, which, as you can imagine, creates some pretty bad conditions for living. And it was actually very cool to see the cellar where the cranium of the cannibalism victim was found. I actually got to see it, which is really cool. But despite this, the people of Jamestown did survive. They went on, and by 1617, the first meeting of the General Assembly happened, and this is like the foundation of what became American democracy, which is really cool. And this was in the church because there was no other building that they could use at the time. From 1610 to 1620s, people started to come over, families, women, people began to move out of the kind of James Fort area into what became more like Jamestown. And people had their houses and their livestock and their plots of land, and it became more of a town. And by 1663, the State House was built. This is where all of the government functions were happening. This was the capital at the time of North America, British North America. And by 1676, the State House was burned down by Nathaniel Bacon during Bacon's Rebellion. And it's a little complicated exactly why that happened, but he was unhappy with the way the government was going, basically. But it was rebuilt, and then it burned down again in 1699. This time, I think it was accidental. Buildings often caught on fire at the time. But they decided to kind of abandon Jamestown as a capital city at that point, and so the capital was actually moved to Williamsburg, and Jamestown went into a pretty immediate decline after that, and it became basically farmland, and until it was kind of rediscovered as historical, like about 100, 150 years ago-ish, not even, it was just used as farmland. So there's a little brief timeline of Jamestown. Definitely if you're interested, look into this more because this is very, very brief. But the site and the goals. So one of the reasons that I kind of focused on the State House in particular is we were actually digging right outside of it. The museum, which was built in 2006, is right on top of the State House. So the State House was excavated right before the museum was built. So we were digging just like right outside of where the State House was. You can see I'm in this photo somewhere. But our goal was just kind of to further understand the two fires that took place at the State House, as well as the State House itself and its functions at the time. Because as you can imagine, like debris and artifacts from the State House could very easily have migrated over because we were digging right outside. And there's also some evidence of burials. The archaeologists there before we arrived, did GPR and found potential burials underneath the ground here. And there was some evidence from written records that State House, like starving time potentially, people were actually buried here. So if that is true, that would be really cool. So that's why we wanted to dig here. So here is an example of a unit. This is our unit. You can see the stratigraphy, you can see how clean it is. It was very important. They made a very big deal about making everything look really clean and neat, the corners, the layers, very defined. So we definitely spent a lot of time troweling and that sort of thing. But I think the result is pretty awesome because you can see the layers, you can see there's a post hole right here as a feature, and you can also see the kind of different colorings on the exposed layer here. This is potentially, I think, a foundation of a building, and we opened up a unit like kind of next to it to like chase that potential structure further. So our daily schedule. We started digging at 8 a.m. every day. We would dig until noon, we'd have an hour for lunch, then we would dig until 4 and go home. Once a week we would do a full day in the lab, which was really fun, and that might have been my favorite part, honestly. We cleaned corrosion off of nails, we sorted and cleaned through artifacts that we'd found in the field. We picked through middens with like fish scales and brick and charcoal and bone and that sort of thing. We did like cleanings of window leads, which was really cool, and we also mended pieces of Delft tile. We did not actually find the Delft tile. I didn't make a single match, but I did mend some matches that other people made, which was very fun. And that was really like an enjoyable part to see that aspect of archaeology, not just the field work, but also the lab work, which was really, really cool. And we also did daily field journals, so we would write down everything we did that day, and we had to turn that in at the end, obviously. And it was really awesome because they emphasized really like writing the why. Why are you doing something? Not just we did this or we found this, like why are you digging? What are you doing when you're digging? The techniques, the materials you're using, whatever else. And that's really helpful to kind of like apply that to future archaeological digs or whatever else you end up doing in archaeology. So I really enjoyed that they kind of pushed us to look at it from that perspective. We also had some field trips. We went to Colonial Williamsburg, we went to St. Mary City, went to Bacon's Castle, and we also had some field schools come and visit us, which was awesome. A little nerve-wracking, but definitely very cool to see the other field school students. And we also did an end of program presentation. So we were able to each choose a topic that we found interesting and do a little presentation for everyone about it. I chose Staffordshire slipware. You can see this is a photo of Staffordshire slipware that we found in the unit, and the reason I wanted to do this was we found a bunch of pieces of Staffordshire slipware in the unit, and it just intrigued me. And here's like a full vessel of Staffordshire slipware, and as you can see, the design on the little piece we found is very similar to the full vessel, which is super cool. So I really liked being able to like pick a topic and just like be able to explore that further, which was cool. So lastly, what we found and the importance of what we found. So we found a lot of modern landscaping. We found 2006 landscaping from when the museum was built. We found 1950s landscaping from when the memorial cross was put in place near our unit. We also found a lot of plow zone. Plow zone is kind of difficult because it disrupts the archaeological context, so it's harder to date things, and it can further destroy artifacts as well, which is not great. We found plow zone, we found plow scars. Then we went further, we found ceramics, including Staffordshire slipware. This is another piece of Staffordshire slipware we found in the unit. We found a lot of pipes, what's cool about pipes is you can tell whether they're English or native based on the color. So the white color is the English and the dark color is the native, which is awesome. We found a lot of nails, very corroded nails, and we found some lithics from pre-contact, which is pretty cool. Not very many because there wasn't a lot of activity in the area, but still cool that we found some. And I think the coolest thing we found was this grenade right here. This is from 1676, most likely, when it was used potentially to blow up the State House during Bacon's Rebellion. So cool that we found a piece of that that's pretty intact. And we also did end up finding the burials. We found the outlines of the burials, including some smaller ones that were probably of children. We did not excavate them. Jamestown is very careful about excavating burials generally, and I think they only excavate like 1 or 2 per year, which is probably a good practice. So we did not go any further. We just saw the outlines of the burials, and we left them alone at that point. But it was really cool to find because we thought we might find them. We weren't sure. We ended up finding them, so it was cool that the GPR was able to kind of like pick up on those burials underground. And what did I learn? I definitely learned that archaeology is a difficult job, and it's not glamorous, and you feel kind of dirty sometimes at the end of the day, but you also feel rewarded by what you're doing, and I always felt good about the work that I did. I learned how to open a unit. I learned how to properly dig through layers, to do the paperwork for each layer, to make stratigraphic diagrams. I learned how to identify features. I learned how to do a bunch of things in the lab that I already kind of mentioned. And I also learned a huge amount about Virginia and about Jamestown history, which was part of the reason that I wanted to do this in the first place. So overall, I had a really great experience, and I'm really thankful for everything that I learned. And anyway, hope you enjoy.